Thank you all for coming out here. I'm going to start just with a couple poems from my debut, Grace Engine, and then I'm going to kind of jump into the talk and read some poems throughout. So just a content warning, these first two poems, they detail real life events of three lynchings that happened. So I just want to kind of have you be aware of that before the reading. Elegy for threats with grace. I sit with the word like schizophrenic until it becomes a color. I spent so many years being afraid to be black that now I'm only afraid of silence, or the silence that it brings. A hunch that what is born in the earth will tear through it. The thread of history, the threat of history, was dredged up from the earth, is sturdy as teeth. When I speak quietly, I'm speaking to a family in Eastdale Springs, Tennessee, or Spring, Texas, saying, I'm sorry. Like how God was sorry when he witnessed the way Spirit Mountain split in two, like Christ's wrist crucified. In every old black man I come across, I see my grandfather. His blue overalls hanging off of his body like his youngest child, who was named after him and who died of AIDS or overdose. His name was Henry, though he went by Clay. Some nights I feel as crazy as I did that night, screaming through the streets, swinging a knife at bushes and mailboxes. Jim McElherron shot the two white men dead when they harassed him. The rocks they threw at him were like unnamed pockets of earth. It took only a few days for the bomb to find him with torches the color of rust and chained him to a hickory tree, setting his body afire, a light that took him with slurs and fists. As a child in school, I would go so long without speaking that people thought I was mute. A child with words only inside him, like a hidden family is inside. But now, on these days, I don't know what to do with my hands. Language is like a month ending with the fire. Roy Robinson lost his mind in the South too, and died in Houston. He was a sign painter who painted little men with big eyes. They speak to him of raptures and spaceships, but he let them too far in. You are not a prophet, and I don't believe in God anymore. My hands are threats, songs long enough to become prayers. Jay, there were bars of hot iron against your skin, leaving a valley glow. You didn't wince or cringe. You cursed those who burned you, never losing your nerve, not breaking into your last breath. I admire and despise that kind of perseverance, yet I don't speak of it, like how much my indecision is decision. Grace and separation. There's a world of the photograph. There's a photograph of Laura Nelson, a rope between her and a tree. The backdrop, more trees. A person in the picture is bound to history, bound to the same color. And there's a sculpture of Mary Turner in bronze holding her stomach. She is childless. Her husband Hazel died a day before her, but with less spectacle. I always thought my mother was crazy for the way she wore blackness like a new wristwatch. And with her skin beige and hazel, I thought she must have been compensating for something. Grief is a healthy disease, unlike forgetting. The body has more than one soul. The main soul is behind the forehead, and the second soul is in the pupils. There's the world of the photograph versus the imagined world. In a picture, everything is placed like a target. I always believed my mother was crazy for not wanting to kill herself on days when her body would no longer do what she needed it to. Like love, make love, or speak. At noon on Sunday in 1918, the mob found Mary 8 months pregnant and took her near Folsom Bridge over the Little River and tied her by her ankles. Her sin was speaking. We are difficult in the sense that we can't unguide ourselves. In the photos of my grandmother, she's always small and scowling like a cub. When she was young, she would never leave home without a blade in her wig. Outside of a club, a man wanted to fight her. She pulled the blade from her wig and cut his chest like tree bark. The next morning, she went to the police station crying, saying she might have killed a man. They laughed at her. God tries out different combinations of mothers with children, rearranging them at the first sign of uncleanliness. The white man broke Mary's stomach in two with a knife. What was cut from her was something more than human. The two cries they let out didn't reach where the two colors met. The brown body meeting the brown dirt. Earth's natural law of what America births. My mother was never crazy, only quiet. A girl-grown woman. In a photo in 1981, she looked like two cries. A batch of berries held close enough together not to burst. Its insides having dark blue ink, like skin. In the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, Douglass states he was doomed to be the witness and a participant of the violence enacted upon Aunt Hester, which he was present for in his childhood. Was the key to his participation his own self-blame for not being able to stop such horrific acts? Or was he claiming that his participation was likely part of his recounting of the events of Aunt Hester's torture? Is he taking responsibility for being a possible extension to that harm done to her? How can Douglass's retelling of this violence that he witnessed be participating in the same violence? 3 African Americans who were lynched are the centerpiece of my manuscript, in which they reappear and are readdressed. The names are Jim McElherron, Laura Nelson, and Mary Turner. And in the process of researching their lives and stories, I came across a photograph of Laura Nelson lynched alongside her son. These individuals are the ones that appeared in the 2 poems I just read. Upon discovering their stories and photos, I began to write to discover juxtapositions and intersections between these individuals and my family and myself. When Grace Engine was still infantile, I believed that recounting the horrors they faced would grant a kind of honor for these people, so others would know of their stories. However, I was not considering the ethical implications of reanimating their deaths for the reader. I was abnormally participating in that same violence done to these individuals through my retelling. During a workshop with the poet Shamash Sharif, she was the first person to challenge my unconsidered intentions and their implications upon myself and my intended audience. reading my poems, in her critique, she said, "What does it mean to look immediately around that moment of violence?" In other words, in my poem for Mary Turner, Grace and Separation, I recounted the events of her being lynched as if I were recounting a graphic news story. Shamaz Sharif hoped to teach me the importance of looking beyond the base level of the graphic nature of the violence. In Grace and Separation, I was looking at Laura Nelson's and Mary Turner's lynched bodies as spectacles by hyperfixating on the violence. Shamaz Sharif told me to shift my gaze away from the trauma, to look around and beyond that moment, and in doing so, prevent my reanimating of their deaths from becoming mere spectacles. She advised me with her own attempts at avoiding these missteps in her work, where she questions why it is that we want to know the most violent end, and who it is that recounting affects, and how it only affects those in the end who feel that violence themselves. These interactions with Shamaz Sharif changed the trajectory of my entire manuscript, where I would chase the potential for more grace in my work with these people I was trying to honor. I chose to readdress Jim McElheran, Laura Nelson, and Mary Turner in new ways, void of any mention of their lynchings. In the poems, Giving Jim Grace, Giving Mary Grace, and Giving Laura Grace, I attempted to show them grace and to readdress, speaking to them how they deserve to be spoken to. So I'm going to read those 3 poems right now. Giving Jim Grace, for Jim McElheran. Lyric is a lie to the sentence, and snow is a silent engine. While in it, all I can imagine is a slow torch prodigal in its returning. I entered your story, Jim, like a crow to a cloud. Leaving Houston, all I could see was the potential of snow on my fingers. And I know that I know this blackness when separated from blackness, and know that I am a motor running off of grief. Jim, 100 years before me, you carried your pistol shiny as a broken mirror. And after reading what happened to you, I knelt down by my bedside like looking for lost change. The pathetic way I left my family in Houston was the pathetic way I found you. As if family was something less visible in the night. As if the snow somehow makes the night less of itself. The only language I choose to acknowledge is distance. No, I was away from all I was meant to know, an animal unaware that his stripes were scars. Telling the truth could kill us. I reach for stories and dead black men for catharsis. In the driveway, I unpeel the frost as a gauze. There are truths I've never told relatives, like how others' memories can speak to you like good rain. Shall I call you brother or uncle then? Jesus Christ, like a lie I were into irony. How only kin can sentence the sentence. Jim, your white light still lights and breathes in cursive. On my skin, where I picked at quills, I wrote grief is a happiness too. Suddenly feeling family as opposed to knowing family, we can bear these truths. I was heavy about myself because snow does something to you that with flesh burns memory into you. And I know if lyric lies to us, it must still reveal a skin perfected in its glow glow. History will submit to you. I will too. Eventually, when you are colored pleased, when your dirt speaks, I will be left dumb still. I won't refer you back to life. There's been enough of that. I falter in guilt at your reanimating. Now I'm trying to unleash you. Having walked with myth and imagination, I thought I counted every stone. The walls grew closer. I walk in a terrible circle. Should I quiet my poet? Yes. I wanted to die too, yes, but concealed the adolescence like a hymn through me. Through me wasn't always the answer. I am Black people and am a series of decisions. Shall I let my again speak for me? No. Again stain the clear water. Can I offer you up to speak if, only if, you are compelled to? I wasn't finished with myself. Where story and desire collide with terrible friction. How full of stories are you? Many. I wake up late too often. How I am inside of the night. As in, is your strength blacker than my weakness is black? Giving Laura grace for Laura Nelson and her son, L.D. Nelson. Like the time I mistook a bridge for a tree, I'm waiting for the poem to correct me. We're afraid and ashamed, sister touch. And all of the square blood in me bruised in the fist of my stomach. I wrote to you once before, Laura, and failed. So I won't write about your lynched body anymore. You are not my mother, so I have no moral contract with you. If I did, I'd probably still only have stories for you. Like in kindergarten, when I punched the black boy in the chest. He punched me too, and we cried together as if this was our shared code for confession. Or the story when I was in the midst of a dirt fight with a black boy my size in a large open square where a house will soon be built. Our hands through the sand, through the air, moving like a clapper in a bell. Where some ended up in my throat, and I choked on that little piece of earth lost in my mouth, staining my voice and what came out next. And my mother took a hot face towel to my tongue. I'm sorry, but I think hurting something black became a habit. When I say earth, I mean God. Maybe it was a living root bridge, is what I tell myself. And maybe black people are born with cedar seeds in us. I used to only believe in death by habit, yet the sound of a woman screaming still frightens me. Though I promise not to martyr you or mother you, I promise the same for LD too. Next year, when I am older and know better, I'll visit Okima, Oklahoma, and dig, and I will plant my hands in the soil and slide my blood back into my wrists like a stubborn vein and wait for your nothing. In my poem, Grace and Separation, I wrote, there's a world of the photograph versus the imagined world. In the picture, everything is placed like a target. Roland Barthes calls the point of connection between the photograph's world and the imagined world of the spectator the punctum. He defines punctum as that which punctures you as a spectator when viewing a photo. Understanding under the guise of poetry, this stands out to me in many ways. In poetry, we are usually searching for the duende in the language, but what happens when you are writing about events traumatic and difficult, in which you must find the punctum and duende in without repurposing that trauma again for the reader? In my Giving Grace poems, I wonder if the thing I'm searching for that could redirect the intention away from the violence is the punctum. What was it in the stories of Jim, Mary, and Laura that punctured me? What do I still desire to be a witness of? Can I be a witness to and not a participant in the violence? Can I witness with some grace? In Grace Engine, I also explore more individuals from history who punctured me. In my attempt to explore their lives, I attempted a few persona poems. With these poems, I wanted to personify Black people who didn't completely sit right with me for one reason or another. I wanted to explore controversial figures from history and question whether if even these individuals were worthy of grace. I'm going to read a series of persona poems in the book I wrote in the voice of William O'Neill. O'Neill was the FBI informant whose collaboration with them led to the murder of Black Panther Fred Hampton. My initial feelings towards O'Neill was disgust and hatred. But when I found out that he committed suicide, my feelings towards him became complicated. So I wanted to explore those feelings and complications in a poem. I first began with a simple prose poem personifying William O'Neill, and I'm going to read that one first. Death Machine Ruin, in the voice of William O'Neill. 1969. William O'Neill. Sir, I've never lost function or focus. I did my job and remained silent. Fred was a friend, but now dead and can't do any more harm. A good man, but witnessing a room so close to death has taught me that even good could be a tattered arm holding back progress. He was a good man, yes, but he was no king. A soldiered Black man exchanging feardom for freedom. Sir, I hope enough. Sir, I hope to prove myself. I hope this was enough to wash away my theft and papers, because this is all I ever wanted to be Black with dignity. 2. 1990, William O'Neill. Uncle, last week a man ran in front of moving traffic on westbound lanes on the Eisenhower Expressway. I haven't seen him since. He was a neighbor, a soft-spoken silent of a man. He must have been looking for a reply to return to him by color that leapt from a pale face. Soon it will be King Day, where Black bodies will crowd on the road like wet sand. I'm lost in the history of money. The erasures are basically me trying to explore something deeper, because when I wrote that first prose block, I felt like there was more underneath the surface from William O'Neill that he was like hiding, that kind of led to his death. So I attempted an erasure, and I felt like that was getting more at maybe what was it like inside. And then I felt like I think I can do more, so I did another erasure, and then I did another one after that. So I'm just kind of read those 3 short erasures, kind of back to back to back, and have this sort of visual aid playing for us as well. And yeah, the idea is just to hope to uncover what he was really thinking or really feeling, because the things he said in public, I think, is not actually accurate. And these 3 will be like my last pieces as well. Will I have a good witness, a good king, fear for myself? Will I express a soft color like wet money? Dear Sir, I have never lost my remain silent. Fred was but witnessing a room close to death. Good can be tattered. Good, yes, but he soldiered freedom. Sir, I hope enough. I hope to wash away, because will a man move the how? I haven't seen a neighbor, a spent man. He must return color from soon. Black, like wet sand, I am lost in. I compromise death. Tar. One never can't harm a god to death and back. He was the soldier I hope I was. I hope to death this black dignity. Unman, a soft man. Reply to him.